If you thought the 10th chapter of 2nd Kings was pretty brutal, you might find this chapter even more so. You'll remember that Jehu killed King Ahaziah of Judah, although the accounts in the Bible, specifically 2nd Kings and 2nd Chronicles, present slightly different details about his final moments and his burial. In the book of 2nd Kings, Ahaziah was shot with an arrow by Jehu during a pursuit and ultimately died from his wounds in Megiddo after fleeing to the pass of Gur. The book of 2nd Chronicles states that Jehu's men found Ahaziah hiding in Samaria and killed him on the king's orders. In either case, he was dead. And it's possible that both those two things happened. He was shot, but he wasn't killed, and he ran away and hid, etc., etc. But here's the thing. When his mother, Athaliah, found out and realized that this was the case, she rose, and what did she do? She destroyed, killed all the royal offspring. Now you heard that right. Hi, I'm Ken Godevanis, and this is Digging for Scriptural Gems. Today we're studying 2 Kings 11, 1-12. As Athaliah was doing this, Aunt Jehosheba, daughter of the also dead King Joram and sister to the dead Ahaziah, took Joash, one of Ahaziah's sons, and stole him away from those being put to death. He was very young, so she placed him in as nurse in one of the bedrooms. Now the NAT says that was where the bed covers were stored. And this was in the Lord's house, not in the palace. By the way, historian Josephus says that it was a place where the bed covers were stored and also where spare furniture and mattresses were stored. Now they were able to save him from Athaliah. The text says they hid him for 6 years in the house of the Lord while Athaliah was reigning over the land. Verse 4 tells us that in the 7th year, one assumes when he was 7 years old, after the 6 years that Joash was hidden from Athaliah, Jehoiada, a high priest, got involved. He brought the captains of hundreds, that's a term that they use for a certain level of captains, of the Kerites. Kerites were also known as Ketherites or Carians, and these were a group of loyal, possibly Philistine, so they were a bit foreign, elite soldiers who served as bodyguards for the king of Judah. They're mentioned here in the conspiracy to put the child Joash on the throne and assassinate his grandmother, Athaliah, who didn't want that lineage to continue on the throne, but she wanted the Ahab lineage to continue. We'll say a bit more about that in a minute. These mercenary troops, loyal to the Davidic dynasty, were essential to the high priest Jehoiada's successful plan to restore the rightful line of kings. The high priest brings them in, and he brings them and the guards into the house of the Lord and puts them under oath. And only then does he show them the king's son, Joash. Now things get quite complicated here due to the names of these kings. Jehoash of Judah, also known as Joash, was the one in our passage hidden as a child and who began his reign at age 7. There was also Jehoash of Israel in the north, who visited the prophet Elisha and fought against Judah. Now these were two separate biblical kings whose reigns overlapped. Joash of Judah was initially a good king, but later fell into idolatry and was assassinated. Joash of Israel, however, continued the sinful practices of his predecessors, though he did achieve military victories and was visited by Elisha before his death. Anyway, the high priest tells these elite soldiers and the guard, he tells them what to do. He says 1/3 on duty on the Sabbath, 1/3 of you who will be on duty on the Sabbath, will keep watch over the king's house, the royal palace. 1/3 of you will be stationed at the foundation gate, or sur. It's called two different things in the Bible. 1/3 at the gate behind the guards for additional defense. Now they were to take turns guarding the palace. And at the same time, 2/3 of them not on duty were to keep watch over the house of the Lord for the king. He then told them to surround the king, that's the young Joash, with their weapons in hand, and to put to death anyone trying to break through their ranks to get to the king. And they had to stay with the king wherever he decided to go. Our text says the captains were given the spears and shields that had been King David's, and they all did their jobs as ordered. The priest then brought Joash in and put a crown on him. They proclaimed him king and anointed him. Everyone clapped and said, "Long live the king." Where have we heard that before? We're going to stop there and dig a little deeper. The details of the Hebrew text suggest that Athaliah had embarked on a campaign to destroy the royal offspring. She used the occasion of her son's death to take power for herself, and she reigned over the land for 6 years. Now, this is a woman who was willing to kill her grandchildren so that she could become the monarch, the ruling monarch, now that her son was dead. And she did reign over the land for 6 years. Now remember that Athaliah was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel and was given to King Jehoram of Judah as a bride. She was a bad influence on both her husband, Jehoram of Judah, and her son, King Ahaziah of Judah. 2 Chronicles chapter 22, verse 11 tells us that Jehosheba, who hid Joash, was the wife of Jehoiada, the high priest. She was a sister to Ahaziah, the son of Athaliah, but probably by a different mother, according to commentator Clark. Jehoiada was a godly man who was concerned with restoring the throne of David to the line of David and taking it away from this daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. Now, why did these soldiers have to take an oath or make an oath? Well, showing them the king's son was a dramatic moment. For 6 years, everyone believed there were no more surviving heirs of David's royal line, and there was no legitimate ruler to displace the wicked Athaliah. The secret had to be secure because the king's son would be immediately killed if his existence were revealed. He chose the Sabbath for the day of the coup because that was the day when the guards changed their shifts and they could assemble 2 groups of guards at the temple at the same time without attracting special attention. Smart man. Now, the reference to, quote, gave him, Joash, testimony, unquote, may well be a reference to some tangible symbol of kingship, perhaps a piece of jewelry such as an amulet or a neck chain. Others suggest it has to do with some kind of document. Commentator David Gusick suggests these were actually the scrolls of God's word, and you couldn't be appointed or anointed king and made king without being in the presence of God's word. Now, the story of the line of David continues to amaze us. It's an amazing story. Many Christians lose a lot of it if their pastors don't preach or teach from the Old Testament and stick only or primarily to the New. Our heritage, folks, is in the Old Testament. The God of the Old Testament is the God of the New Testament. We cannot and must not ignore what he did for his people and ultimately for the whole world for approximately 2,000 years before sending us his son. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Next time, we're going to learn about Athaliah's death and a renewal of the covenant. But by whom? Join us for that. In the meantime, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, please indicate so on the video you're watching. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. YouTube, then type in Digging for Scriptural Gems and subscribe. But most importantly, keep on studying God's Word.